Before we begin, if you're someone who believes that justice still matters and that sometimes the only right response is a firm one, then take a moment to subscribe. Here on this channel, we share the kind of sci-fi stories that remind us why humanity, when pushed, doesn't back down. HFY stories. Real power, real principle. Now, let me tell you a story. They weren't soldiers. They weren't carrying weapons. They were medics, engineers, volunteer aid workers, a convoy of hospital ships and humanitarian freighters crossing deep space to help a devastated colony. They flew under neutral colors, protected by interstellar law. They weren't a threat to anyone, and someone fired on them anyway. No warning. No demand, just destruction. Thousands of lives, gone. But one signal got through. A final distress call, sent across an old diplomatic band, to a place no one expected. Earth, and Earth didn't hesitate. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous. The rescue convoy had been organized in record time, pulling together aid ships, medical personnel, and volunteers from across 5 neutral worlds. Their destination was Elion 3, a colony world that had suffered a catastrophic mining collapse after a moonquake destabilized the underground resource grid. Over 70,000 civilians were trapped, with infrastructure in ruins and no time left. The Galactic Assembly had issued a rare cross-faction call to action. No politics, no credits. Just help, and Earth had answered. Though humanity had kept to itself in recent years, quiet, watchful, not quite absent but not entirely present, it still honored the old pacts when it came to civilians. Earth's humanitarian corps, once considered outdated, had never been disbanded. They kept their ships running, their medics trained, their principles intact. 3 Earth hospital ships joined the convoy, escorted by unarmed engineering craft and supply vessels. Other ships came from the Andari, the Valari, and even a few fringe systems. Dozens of vessels flying neutral white, marked with the Universal Aid crest. They traveled without stealth, without escort fighters, because they didn't need them. Humanitarian convoys had always been protected, not by weapons, but by agreement. By honor, the oldest law of the stars. You do not fire on those who bring healing. It had been respected for generations, until now. The attack came in the outer arc of the Vakari corridor. No warning, no contact, just ships, black, angular, unidentified, dropping from a distortion wave and opening fire. The lead hospital ship, the Mercy Dawn, was the first to go. A single beam tore through its hull. It didn't explode. It folded, in on itself, collapsing with all aboard. Panic followed. Some ships tried to break formation and run. Others stayed to send emergency broadcasts. But the jamming fields were already in place. Long-range communications were blocked. Escape routes sealed. It was not a mistake. It was not an accident. It was a deliberate massacre. The enemy didn't speak, didn't respond to hails. They destroyed the aid convoy ship by ship, burning out life support systems, vaporizing cores, turning a peaceful mission into a graveyard in the cold. And yet, in the middle of that chaos, one signal got through. Small Earth craft Raleigh 12, an old orbital support unit, managed to slingshot a narrow-band distress call through a dead relay hidden in a forgotten corner of space. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't elaborate. Just 5 words. Convoy destroyed. Civilians dead. Earth. That word, Earth, was intentional, because the crew of Raleigh 12 knew something that many in the galaxy had forgotten. Earth may have stepped back from the grand stage. They may have withdrawn from the bureaucracy of the assembly, but they hadn't gone soft. And they hadn't forgotten what lines never get crossed. And firing on a rescue convoy? That wasn't a line. That was a trigger. The message vanished into the void, the final act of a crew that wouldn't live to see the response. And somewhere, in the silence of an old Terran monitoring station, buried deep beneath the icy crust of a moon no one had visited in decades, a single red light blinked on. There were places in the galaxy that most had forgotten, old outposts, cold moons, frozen relay hubs humming with minimal power, relics from an earlier age, when wars were hot, alliances fragile, and Earth had stood at the center of the storm. One such place lay buried beneath the surface of Galeos Beta, a barren satellite spinning quietly near the edge of the Vicari Reach. It wasn't marked on most star charts anymore. Even the locals called it the Shell because it looked abandoned. Just another lump of rock caught in a frozen orbit, but inside, deep beneath layers of ice and forgotten rock, something still waited. Post 47A, a Terran relay and monitoring station, built during the expansion era, left operational long after. Earth pulled back from galactic affairs, manned not by soldiers but by watchers, quiet technicians, engineers with patience, not weapons. They were given one mission: listen. Decades passed. Signals came and went. Most were benign: shipping logs, weather anomalies, unconfirmed pings. Post 47A recorded it all, sent it back to Earth, and said nothing. But then the light came on, not blinking, not yellow. Red. The room changed instantly. Automated klaxons pulsed through the ice-sheathed hallways, and from deep within the command core, long dormant systems came to life, systems that hadn't been touched in nearly 70 years. An ancient Earth protocol, Echo Resolve. The on-duty technician, a gray-bearded man named Dalen Reed, stared at the screen as the message decrypted. 5 words. No embellishment, no confusion. Convoy destroyed. Civilians dead. Earth. There was no hesitation, no debate. The moment the word Earth appeared in that context, Dalen knew what to do. He accessed a sealed terminal, one that required a physical key preserved in a vacuum vault beneath his desk. The kind of thing no one thought they'd ever use again. And then, with a calm breath and a trembling hand, he keyed in the override sequence. That signal, faint, old, and desperate, was forwarded directly to Earth's strategic response grid. Within seconds, lights flared across secure servers in orbital command. Earth's home defense systems acknowledged the breach, and in one of the oldest bunkers beneath Mount Vesper, a pair of eyes opened in front of a cold console, not artificial, not mechanical, human. The silence was broken. Earth had heard, and Earth remembered. In the skies above Earth, orbital rings reoriented. War assets, previously mothballed, were instantly placed on high alert. Ships that had been dormant for decades activated reactor cores. Code words long buried in protocol books were whispered again by living voices. Honor fire confirmed. This is no drill. The footage from the attack was recovered, reconstructed from residual quantum scatter across the destroyed zone. And what it showed made the decision easy. Unarmed ships, clearly marked with neutral humanitarian tags, burning in silence while those who had sworn to protect watched in fear. No identification on the attackers, no claim, no remorse. But one thing stood out. One of the enemy ships had paused over the burning wreck of the Mercy Dawn. Paused long, enough to record, long enough to admire, that, more than anything else, made Earth move. Because Earth didn't just respond to death, it responded to cruelty, and from that moment forward, Earth's answer was already in motion. There was no meeting, no summit, no endless debate in Earth's halls of power. They didn't send envoys. They didn't wait for confirmation, because Earth had seen enough. The moment the decrypted data stream confirmed the loss of the humanitarian Convoy, especially with civilian medics, children, and non-combatants aboard, a singular ancient protocol activated across all levels of defense. Honor fire. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about politics or positioning. Honor fire was older than Earth's membership in the Assembly, older than its withdrawal. It dated back to a time when humanity had nearly destroyed itself, and vowed never to stand by when innocents burned. The mandate was simple. If any peaceful mission operating under Terran humanitarian charter is deliberately targeted and destroyed, humanity responds immediately, without hesitation, without waiting for approval. And now, that moment had come. Within hours, old world command bunkers lit up. Fleets that hadn't moved in decades came online. From the oceans of Europa to the desert complexes of Earth's equator, launch bays opened and warships began to rise. But these weren't the showy, ceremonial cruisers of newer civilizations. These were Terran response vessels, quiet, grim, and built with a different kind of warfare in mind. Each one was named not for cities or planets, but for principles: TRV Justice, TRV Mercy's Debt, TRV Iron Resolve, TRV Silent Flame, and at the head of it all, one ship, larger than the rest, older than most, but still unmatched in capability. TRV Revenant, the flagship of Earth's honor fire. Protocol, commanded not by a council or an AI, but by a flesh-and-blood human. Fleet Marshal Adrian Kale, descended from the original peacekeeping fleets that helped unify the Spiral Arms. She didn't speak to cameras, didn't address the media. She didn't need to. Her order was clear and recorded in the official war log for only one reason. Our people were slaughtered while bringing aid. Our colors were burned. There will be no warnings. We respond now. And, with that, the fleet jumped. No fanfare. No threat broadcast. They didn't even send a message to the Galactic Assembly, because the Assembly had done nothing. They had seen the reports, heard the faint distress beacons, and waited. Waited to verify, to deliberate, to find consensus. Earth wasn't interested in consensus. It was interested in justice. And justice doesn't ask for permission. As the fleet warped into high transit velocity, signals from automated systems across Earth's sphere of influence updated in real time. Civilian networks were informed. All humanitarian traffic was grounded for safety. Medical facilities prepared for possible triage overflow. But there was no panic, because Earth's people knew what this was. Not a war, a response. And when Earth responds, it doesn't come to discuss. It comes to end. Within a day, Terran ships reached the outer edge of the Vakari corridor. What they found there was worse than the original message had shown. Wreckage still drifted, medical kits and supply pods frozen in vacuum. Personal belongings scattered across space, photos, drawings, aid mission logs, floating reminders of lives extinguished without cause. And beyond the field of debris, the attackers' ships still lingered, unmarked, silent, watching. They weren't retreating. They weren't hiding. They believed there would be no consequence. But as the first human warships came out of fold space, that belief shattered. Because the attackers had made one fatal mistake. They had mistaken Earth's quiet for absence, its patience for cowardice, its silence for weakness. They were wrong. And now, with the TRV Revenant front and center, broadcasting its identity across every known frequency, they would learn what it means when Earth says, enough. The attackers didn't respond. They didn't run. They held their position in the wreckage field, ships humming with stolen energy, their black hulls still flecked with debris from the medical convoy they'd destroyed. Perhaps they thought Earth would hesitate. Perhaps they assumed the humans would follow the same protocol the rest of the galaxy used. Slow, careful, diplomatic. They were wrong. The Terran fleet exited fold space in full formation. Not staggered, not vulnerable. From the first moment, they were in combat posture, but they didn't fire immediately. Instead, the TRV Revenant sent one transmission across all local bands, unencrypted. The voice was human, calm, female, tired. This is Earth Fleet. You destroyed a neutral aid, convoy, civilians, medics, children. You were given a chance to remain unknown. That choice is gone. You will not receive another warning. This is not retaliation, this is removal. And then the comms cut. Not a threat, not a negotiation, a verdict. On the bridge of the Revenant, the fleet marshal gave a quiet order. Engage. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Earth ships didn't open with missiles or massive barrages. They didn't waste time showing power. They showed precision. One by one, the enemy ships were disarmed, not by overwhelming firepower, but by systems hacks, weapon neutralizers, and pinpoint kinetic strikes to exposed heat exchangers and command relays. A dozen ships tried to warp out. The Revenant deployed a microburst gravity net. They didn't warp. They tore apart in their own folds. Those that attempted to engage the Terran fleet learned something else. Earth's ships didn't move, the way theirs did. They didn't accelerate in arcs or rely on forward thrust. They pivoted, shifted, and repositioned using gravimetric threading and low-pulse magnetic fields that made them appear to glide across space like predators circling prey. Enemy weapons failed to lock. Artificial intelligences declared targeting errors. Even the most advanced systems began to panic. One attacker's core AI attempted to surrender. It was met with silence. Because humans don't negotiate with those who burn ambulances. The engagement lasted 7 minutes. After that, there were no enemy ships left, no wreckage, no prisoners, just absence, the clean, surgical kind that only Earth delivers when it wants to make a point. The Terran fleet remained in the area for another hour. They didn't pursue survivors because there were none. They didn't issue statements. They simply recovered what was left of the convoy. Pods were located. Remains were retrieved. A data beacon from Raleigh 12 was recovered. Its signal still, pulsing the same 5 words. They brought it home. That act mattered more than anything else. Because Earth wasn't just delivering justice. It was honoring the fallen. The TRV Mercy's debt transmitted a final signal across the corridor. Humanitarian law stands. The price of breaking it is absolute. The signal wasn't meant for the attackers. It was meant for everyone else. The corridor was silent. The enemy ships were gone. Atomized, dismantled, erased. Not a single hull remained. Not a fragment of wreckage. Just a strange stillness, as if space itself knew something sacred had just passed through. But Earth wasn't finished. The attack on the convoy had been deliberate, calculated. Someone had sent those ships. Someone had funded, authorized, and controlled them. And so Earth followed the trail. Not to punish, to end it. Fleet Marshal Adrienne Kale reviewed the decrypted logs retrieved from the Raleigh 12 beacon and the radiation signatures left behind in the blast zones. Within hours, Earth Fleet pinpointed the source. Not a rogue faction, not some pirate warband. A regional power, Zarnethi Dominion. Small, aggressive. Known for ignoring treaties, preying on unarmed outposts, and operating behind diplomatic shields. Provided by the larger assembly systems, the Zarnethi had always assumed they were too minor to matter. Too distant to face consequences. Until now. The Terran fleet reformed and jumped again. No warning to the Zarnethi. No announcement of charges. They already knew what they had done. And when the fleet arrived at the Zarnethi central staging area, it didn't slow down. Their orbital defenses came online instantly. Hundreds of turret platforms, stealth interceptors, planetary shields. But none of it mattered. Because Earth didn't attack like the rest of the galaxy. It didn't escalate. It surgically removed. Each Zarnethi platform was taken out with precision. Systems collapsed from internal overloads. Power cores melted down without explosions, simply reduced to silence. Ships tried to launch. Their engines seized before leaving the dry docks. The capital station, once a hub of military command, was isolated by gravitational pinfolds. Not destroyed, disconnected from time itself. Frozen. No one died unnecessarily. No cities were bombed. No civilians targeted, because that was the difference. Earth did not lash out. It corrected. With a force so efficient, so impossibly controlled that the word war no longer applied. This was justice, delivered not from emotion, but from principle. One Zarnethi leader, desperate, tried to contact Earth Fleet mid-assault. The message was intercepted, flagged, ignored, because Earth does not accept apologies after the dead are already counted. And when the operation was over, the Zarnethi Dominion ceased to exist as a military power. Their infrastructure collapsed, their fleets dismantled, their communications networks dissolved into static, not occupied, not ruled, neutralized. Earth didn't take territory, didn't raise a flag, didn't install governors. It simply looked at what had been done to its people and made sure it could never happen again. That's how humanity wages war, not for conquest but for clarity. The assembly took notice. Their diplomatic channels lit up with urgent questions, but Earth didn't answer. It didn't need to. Because every world, every civilization, every species across the spiral arm saw the message in what had just happened. You can threaten Earth. You can provoke it. You might even strike it. But if you strike the ones under its protection, if you harm those carrying its medical kits, its rescue tags, its peace banners, then Earth comes, not with fire, with finality. And when it's over, there is no occupation, no exploitation, no profit, just the silence that comes after a lesson is taught. The stars didn't go dim. The planets didn't shake. There were no grand broadcasts, no fleets forming in opposition, but across the galaxy, people watched. They watched as the Zarnethi Dominion, once loud, defiant, and feared, vanished overnight. No war declared, no negotiations held, just a precise, unflinching answer to a crime the galaxy had chosen to tolerate. It wasn't the speed that shook the assembly, it was the control. They'd seen retaliation before. They'd seen retribution, wild, messy, full of collateral, but this was different. Earth hadn't come for revenge. It had come to restore balance, and when it was done, it had simply turned away. It left the wreckage where it was, not as a warning, as a record, as if to say, let history remember who started it. Let silence remind you who ended it. For many, that silence was the loudest sound they'd ever heard. World leaders who had once scoffed at Terran old world values found themselves revisiting every treaty and protocol involving Earth. Some scrambled to reaffirm humanitarian protections. Others sent quiet messages of thanks, unsigned, unrecorded, but understood. And in every corner of the galaxy, ordinary people felt the shift. Because this wasn't about power. It wasn't even about Earth. It was about hope. Hope that somewhere someone still held the line, that in a galaxy full of politics and games there was still a force that didn't care for advantage or leverage, only right and wrong. Children were told the story of the rescue convoy, not just the tragedy, but what came after. Teachers spoke of the TRV Revenant, not as a ship of war but as a symbol of purpose. Medics, once ashamed of how little their governments had done, now wore Terran emblems on their uniforms in quiet solidarity. Even rival powers took note, not in fear, but in respect. Because Earth had never claimed to be perfect. It didn't boast, or posture, or seek recognition. It acted, and the way it acted told the galaxy everything it needed to know. Humanity was still what the legends said, stubborn, emotional, relentless. But behind that was something older. A kind of justice you couldn't manufacture. A belief that if you stand under a white flag, you shouldn't need a shield. And if you attack those who carry hope instead of weapons, you don't get a tribunal. You get a Terran response. And now the galaxy understood what that meant. Not tyranny, not dominance, accountability. The Terran fleet didn't stay. There was no ceremony, no press release, no celebration of victory. Once the Zarnethi threat was neutralized, the ships aligned their jump vectors and vanished, one by one, into the folds of space. Only the TRV Revenant remained for a while longer. It held position above the empty command center of what used to be the Dominion's high citadel. For 12 minutes, it was completely still. No signals, no movement, just watching. And then, with the quiet pulse of a low-frequency band, it sent a single message. Broadcast not just to the remnants of the Dominion, but across all major assembly channels. Humanitarian law is not a suggestion. That was it. No demands. No threats. No further explanation. Earth had spoken. Once. And then it went silent. The revenant disappeared moments later, vanishing into fold space, leaving only a residual energy field and a perfectly quiet sky. In the days that followed, Earth closed its military channels. It issued no follow-up transmissions, no apologies, no explanations, because it didn't need to. The message had landed like a weight across the stars, and for the first time in a long time, the galaxy stopped arguing about what Earth was. They stopped theorizing, mocking, or questioning. They understood. Earth hadn't acted out of vengeance. It hadn't acted because of politics or prestige. It had acted because it had principles. And when those principles were violated, when innocent lives were taken under the protection of neutrality and compassion, Earth answered, not with chaos, but with absolute clarity. From that point forward, no medical vessel, no aid freighter, no rescue team bearing Earth's insignia was ever questioned again. They passed through war zones untouched, passed through pirate systems unbothered. Even the most violent syndicates looked the other way when Earth's colors approached, because everyone remembered what happened the last time someone dared to fire on mercy, and how Earth replied, not with a show of power, but with the simple, undeniable promise, we are still watching. The Vekari corridor healed. The convoys returned, larger now, better equipped, more widely respected than ever. Humanitarian missions resumed, their insignias no longer ignored or questioned, but honored. And at the heart of it all, one truth endured. Earth didn't go to war for power. It went for principle. No territory was claimed, no new borders drawn. Earth made no demands, issued no political reforms, and took no credit. But what it left behind was something greater than influence. It left behind certainty. Every species, every faction, every drifting station now remembered the day when the sky split open and a human fleet appeared, not to conquer, but to correct. Children learned about the convoy not only as tragedy, but as a reminder that even in a galaxy spinning wildly out of control, there were still lines you did not cross, not because of fear, because of respect. Peace, after all, is a fragile thing. It's not held together by laws or treaties alone. Sometimes it's held together by the knowledge that someone will still stand when others kneel. And Earth stood quietly, efficiently, unshakably. It left behind no flag, no empire, no monument, just a presence, and in every diplomatic chamber, on every military bridge, one phrase found its way into doctrine, law, and common speech. If Earth moves, listen. If Earth responds, clear a path. Because Earth didn't start wars anymore. It finished them, and only when it had no other choice. So now, deep in the star lanes where ships still vanish and the shadows grow long, people speak in low tones of that day. The day the white-bannered fleet was struck. The day Earth said, enough. And the day the galaxy was reminded that principles, when defended with purpose, are more powerful than any weapon ever built.